Good morning, Beacon. It is a gorgeous fall day here in New Jersey. I'm the Reverend Emilie Bogus. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm welcoming you to Beacon, a Unitarian Universalist congregation located here in Summit, New Jersey, on the land of the Lenni Lenape Native Americans. Throughout the month of November, Beacon is holding history. That's our theme this month. And we know that each Sunday we are gathering, you are bringing your stories and the stories of your ancestors into this sacred space. Often when we arrive, we can feel caught in those stories, as if we are just living out the same story over and over again. That's why we have this weekly practice of worship, reflecting on those stories and asking, so what? What does this mean in my life? And maybe I have another choice, or maybe more choices than I think possible. That's why we come together. And so I want to welcome you into this sacred space, virtually and in person. I am delighted to be leading our service this morning with Mary Early-Zald, Beacon's new community minister. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Emily. I am really happy to be here. My name is Mary Early-Zald. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a Unitarian Universalist chaplain, soon to be ordained as a minister. My call is to care in solidarity with people who are marginalized, in particular young people. And I meet people wherever they have needs. In the streets, in shelters, in jails or prisons, and in protest spaces, just to name a few.
A few of you might be wondering, like, okay, so we've got our co-ministers, Reverend Robin and myself. We've got an intern minister who's Nicole Jacobson, who's learning to be a minister and going to seminary. And now we've got Mary, our community minister. And as you can see, just from her description of what she is bringing to community ministry, how our mission and ministries align so well. And so out of all the things you just said, Mary, I can imagine so many things that you might be partnering with us on. But there is one specific ministry that you wanted to be a part of. Can you tell us more about it?
Yes. I am so looking forward to being a part of Summit Warm Hearts. And I'm thrilled that I'm going to be providing spiritual care to the guests at Summit Warm Hearts, those who bring needs in particular, in this particular way, to this space, and to bring my gifts and to share with their gifts and work together.
And as it so happened this morning, right as Mary was arriving,
Yes.
One of our Summit Warm Hearts neighbors actually pulled up on their bike and said, hey, it's really cold out.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any clothes? When are you opening? And we are really trying hard to open this Wednesday, November 17th, and we need volunteers to make sure that happens. Thankfully, Missy Rogers has stepped up to lead the volunteer part of the program. So if you'd like to volunteer, the Summit Warm Hearts is gathering each and every day, Monday through Saturday from 9 to 1, and then on Sundays from 1 to 4. And if you'd like to volunteer, we would love to have you. Just reach out to me, Emilie at summitbeacon.org, and I will make sure you are connected. So, beloved, welcome to our service this morning. Let's begin this time of centering ourselves in gratitude. Gratitude for all the ways that we make Beacon's mission come alive, both inside and outside our walls. And Mary, we're so delighted to have you with us. Grateful for our veterans this week and their service to our country as we honor Veterans Day. And grateful for life that is forever unfolding into the story that we live out. Welcome.
Our chalice lighting this morning comes from Mark Morrison Reed. The task of the religious community. The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship, discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens and our strength is renewed.
You got to do when the Spirit says do. You got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you got to do. Oh Lord, you've got to do when the Spirit says do. You got to sing when the Spirit says sing. You got to sing when the Spirit says sing. When the Spirit says sing, you got to sing along. You got to sing when the Spirit says sing. You got to dance when the Spirit says dance. You got to dance when the Spirit says dance. When the Spirit says dance, you gotta dance all around. You got to dance when the Spirit says dance. You got to do when the Spirit says do. You got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you got to do. Oh Lord, you got to do when the Spirit says do.
Do you remember the last time you hurt yourself while playing? Maybe you fell off a climbing structure or your bike, or maybe you tripped over your untied shoelaces. How about the last time something really happy happened, like maybe you got a gift, or you got to spend time with your best friend, or you baked some cookies? Can you remember what both experiences felt like? Can you remember how you responded to them? Of the two experiences, the one where you hurt yourself and the one where something happy happened, which one do you remember more? It seems that for most people, we tend to not only remember, but we tend to remember for a long time the hurt we felt. In fact, families tend to recall and tell stories where they or their loved ones were hurt far more than when happy things might have happened. It turns out that the hurt and the non-hurtful moments both light up similar parts of the brain, but we hold on to the hurtful moments more because they take longer to heal. They stay in our bodies longer, and we might need to do more exercises like breathing or dancing to restore balance. Some people say it takes repeated positive, joyous, or happy experiences to make sure that we can remember them. What a great reason to help us remember to be positive in all we do. So here are 2 things to try to remember. Do body exercises to restore balance after hurtful experiences. Body exercises like standing on one leg, going for a bike ride, breathing, taking deep breaths, putting on some music and dancing. Shake it out, people. And the second thing to remember when you're done with your body exercises is to always be kind and positive. Let's help each other remember these two things. Here ends our story for all ages.
Good morning, Beacon. My name is Mary, and my pronouns are she, her, and I am your new community minister. And I'd like to invite you into this time of quiet reflection, meditation, and prayer with these words from Nathan Walker called A Survival Meditation. I invite you to find yourself in a comfortable posture, noticing how you are centered and grounded in your body, finding yourself with your feet rooted in the earth, and your sit bones planted in your seat. I invite you to notice your breath, breathing in and out. Not in any particular way, just as you find it. Breathing in, I'm aware of my pain. Breathing out, I am aware that I am not my pain. Breathing in, I am aware of my past. Breathing out, I am aware that I am not my past. Breathing in, I am aware of my anger. Breathing out, I am aware that I am not my anger. Breathing in, I am aware of my despair. Breathing out, I am aware that I am not my despair. Breathing in, I am aware of peace. Breathing out, I am aware that I am worthy of peace. Breathing in, I am aware of love. Breathing out, I am aware that I am worthy of love. Breathing in, I am aware of joy. Breathing out, I am aware that I am an agent of joy. Breathing in, I am aware of hope. Breathing out, I am aware that I am an agent of hope. Breathing in, I am aware. And as you are ready, let yourself re-enter this communal space. If you've closed your eyes, you can open them and rejoin us all together. May it be so.
Good morning. My name is Kathleen Grant, and I serve as a chaplain here at Beacon. As we join together in this ancient ritual of kindling of lights, may we recognize the multitudes that we each carry. We welcome it all to this space. Nothing is too bright or too dark for us to hold together. Put your hand on your heart. Feel the life inside, the steady beat connecting you to all life on earth. For the sorrow in your heart, the pain we experience in our bodies and minds, we light a candle. We kindle a light for the fear we experience as we witness ecological devastation and climate crisis. We recognize the ongoing pain and grief as we struggle to reconcile with our violent, gruesome history and grieve the loss of who we thought we were as a people and a nation. We name our sorrows and we hold them together as a community. Just as we witness the pain of this world, so do we rejoice in the joy and beauty and blessings that are all around us and within us. We have the honor of being present during the changing of another season, another fall, with cold blasts of air that hit our face and fill our lungs, the joy of the satisfying crunch of leaves under our feet, the majesty of crimson, gold, and burgundy leaves that dance in the breeze and flutter to the ground. We light a candle for the vibrancy of nature, the beauty of our living earth, this mysterious and sacred natural world for which we are all part. What are the joys on your heart today, beloved? For all of your joys, and for you, we give thanks.
Hi, we are the Fords, John and Janet. We started attending the Unitarian Universalist Church in Summit in 1962. We went there because we'd been living in Rome, and we had been taking our 5-year-old twins to visit the catacombs. And wherever we went, the nuns would say, "Oh, bones of Christians, bones of Christians." Tee-hee, tee-hee. And so one of our children said, "Do we know any Christians?" So we decided we had not been attending to their religious education. And the Unitarian Church was the obvious answer for us. I had been a Unitarian in college, but John was a relapsed Presbyterian. Can I say that? Yes. So when we started at the church, we did not become members. I did not become a member for 30 years, and I happened to become a member because David, who was the minister, said that he would have an amnesty for anybody who wanted to join the church. Amnesty meant that you didn't have a breakfast in your honor, and it was not recognized in the newsletter. There were 30 of us that joined the church on that occasion, and no one ever knew it. John, on the other hand, has never joined the church because he does not believe in organized religion. And we can certainly say that at that time our church was not organized. One thing about the services we had, they were all conducted by the minister. We never had visiting speakers. The minister spoke, and the only time that the audience was allowed to speak was at the feedback. At the end of every service, we had a feedback. Well, there was one woman in the congregation who was always the first to stand up in the feedback, and she brought up every item that she was interested in. Had nothing to do with the sermon, was not a feedback, but she went on and on and on to the point where we had to get rid of the feedback. So no more feedback. However, when I was on the board, not yet a member, they asked the board members to give a short speech. So I said that our marriage was much like the church. At this time, we didn't know what to do with our 2 different properties. I said we had the same problem in our marriage. John wanted a sheep farm in New Zealand, and I wanted an apartment in Paris. Well, he had moved to going to Oregon, and I wanted New York City. So we compromised, and we stayed in New Jersey. Thank you.
I was involved in the church back when the LRY existed. LRY was created by the church in about 1899 or something like that. And it was doing very well. It was independent of the church, totally. Liberal religious youth, they were called. They had no affiliation with the church other than they gave them space. They had no control over them or vice versa. And it was a very, very wild group. They could do basically what they wanted with their own funding. They had significant funding from previous LRY people who left them money. And they were a very great group and did an awful lot of work for an awful lot of people. They were defunded by the manipulations by the Curia up in Boston. But they were a very excellent thing. I worked with them for for 10 years I was advisor to them and had a great time with them. I always said they were my psychoanalysts. They did such a good job with me. I was a old-fashioned 1950 kid, you know, with no ideas. And here this was in 1970, and the group was, liberal would not be the word. They were beyond liberal, not quite radical, but almost. Really helped a lot, though, to have them, giving them a chance to speak their piece.
And now the offering will be taken.
Yes, exactly.
Our first reading is an excerpt from Joy Harjo's poem, Remember. Born in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1951, Harjo is a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation. You can find a link to the full poem in the chat. Remember, you are all people, and all people are you. Remember, you are this universe, and this universe is you. Remember, all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember, language comes from this. Remember, the dance language is, that life is. Remember. Our second reading is an excerpt from Frances Ellen Harper Watkins, the most prominent African-American woman writers of her generation, and a joint member of the Philadelphia's First Unitarian Church and the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Harper Watkins was delivering a speech at a women's rights convention in New York City in 1866, calling white women to practice a deeper solidarity. I feel I am something of a novice upon this platform, born of a race whose inheritance has been outraged and wrong. Most of my life has been spent in battling those wrongs, but I did not feel as keenly as others that I had these rights in common with other women, which are now demanded. I say then that justice is not fulfilled so long as women are unequal before the law. We are all bound together in one great bundle of humanity, and society cannot trample on the weakest and feeblest of its members without receiving the curse in its own soul. You tried that in the case of the Negro. You pressed him down for 2 centuries, and in doing so, you crippled the moral strength and paralyzed the spiritual energies of the white men of this country. When the hands of the black were fettered, white men were deprived of the liberty of speech and the freedom of the press. Society cannot afford to neglect the enlightenment of any class of its members. This grand and glorious revolution, which has commenced, will fail to reach its climax of success until throughout the length and breadth of the American Republic, it will have no privileged class trampling upon and outraging the unprivileged classes, but will be then one great privileged nation whose privilege will be to produce the loftiest manhood and womanhood that humanity can attain. Thank you.
One of my first visits upon being fully vaccinated in May was to Cedar Crest Senior Living to have lunch with Janet and John Ford. In fact, Janet made me take home the rest of the soup that she had made for me. And I am thankful to Carol Conger Miller for traveling to Cedar Crest this week to both capture their stories and to return Janet's soup pan to her. One of the silver linings of this pandemic has been these visits and these moments of reconnection. It's funny, I've actually been embarrassed to realize that my post-vaccine visit was too often my very first visit to people's homes. Before the pandemic, this sanctuary was our central meeting place. And there's something meaningful about meeting in a person's home. It makes space for a deeper conversation. Or maybe it's just the pandemic. But I have to tell you that in my visits with people, they aren't mincing words. Our conversations are dominated, at least after the niceties are over or the shoulds around how grateful we should be. People then get into a deeper conversation where they express a deep sadness alongside a pushed down anger. What I am hearing are phrases like, "It wasn't supposed to be like this, life." Or, "I don't know how to make sense of all of everything that's happening right now." I've heard people say to me, "I don't recognize my neighbor, let alone my country." They've asked me, "Hey, what's going to happen to my grandchildren? What world am I leaving them?" And then I've heard them say, "It's like a nightmare that I can't wake up from." Yes, of course, we are talking about the pandemic and the politics of the pandemic. We are talking about a divided nation and a world on edge. We are talking about a despair that the planet is dying, as well as a reckoning, a real reckoning with our nation's history. And that is on a large scale, not to mention how all of these things are mixing and mingling with our personal lives. Just this week, I heard a man on a radio say to the reporter, "This is a time in which we need to wrestle with our identity as a community and as a people." We are indeed wrestling, beloved. When my parents moved from Kentucky to Pennsylvania, the images on the front page of the sports section of the newspaper went from college basketball players making jump shots in Kentucky to high school sweaty males wrapped together like pretzels on a floor mat in Pennsylvania. It was a startling image the first time that my parents opened the sports section. And it is that image that I have seen again and again as I am in these conversations. What are you wrestling, beloved? Cairo Jewel Lingo tells a story about a particular moment of inner wrestling. She was a young Buddhist nun living in Thich Nhat Hanh's Plum Village community in France. One day, she came to the final exercise in a guided meditation. Breathing in, I dwell in the present moment. Breathing out, I know this is a wonderful moment. That's where she got stuck. She could not affirm this moment as wonderful. There was too much inequality, too much hatred, too much devastation and chaos. Knowing what she knew, how could this be called wonderful? And so every time she got to that final line of her spiritual practice, Cairo Jewel Linga found herself on a wrestling mat, trapped. In a remote Swiss village in the winter of 1953, James Baldwin was also wrestling. Depressed and distracted, he sought refuge in the chalet that his lover had inherited from his family. Baldwin begins his essay, A Stranger in a Village. From all available evidence, no Black man had ever set foot in this tiny Swiss village before I came. The village is surrounded on all four sides by mountain peaks. It is remote. In fact, the woman who lived next door to James Baldwin had also never seen a typewriter. In fact, his was the lone typewriter in the village. Baldwin's presence to the villager was what he called a living wonder. In fact, the villagers marveled at him. He writes, I knew that they did not mean to be unkind, and I know it now. It is necessary, nevertheless, for me to repeat this to myself each time I walk out of the chalet. Why? Why does he need to repeat that they are not being unkind? They don't mean to be unkind? Because every time the villagers, whether children or adults, marvel at him, they have no idea of the echoes, for that's what he calls them, the echoes that occur within him. Even in this remote village, Baldwin could not escape the echoes of pain, causing him to write one of his most quoted lines. He writes, Joyce is right about history being a nightmare, but it may be the nightmare from which no one can awaken. People are trapped in history, and history is trapped in them. Meaning, of course, that we are born into these systems. We are born into these places. And then history comes alive in us and we keep perpetuating it, even when we don't realize it. And he then goes on to trace his present moment there in 1953, being a stranger among these Swiss villagers. And he traces that moment back through history to the moment where a desire for freedom and prosperity for European colonizers came with a heavy price. The buying and selling of African human beings into slavery, not to mention the displacement and genocide of indigenous peoples. And he, there in 1953, is living out that legacy. He writes, I thought of white men arriving for the first time in an African village, strangers there as I am a stranger here. And I tried to imagine the astounded populace touching their hair and marveling at the color of their skin. But there is a great difference between being the first white man to be seen by Africans and being the first black man to be seen by whites. The white man takes the astonishment as tribute, for he arrives to conquer and to convert the natives, whose inferiority in relation to himself is not even to be questioned. Whereas I, without a thought of conquest, find myself among a people whose culture controls me, has even now, in a sense, created me, people who have cost me more in anguish and rage than they will ever know, who yet do not even know of my existence. The astonishment, he writes, with which I have been greeted, or that I might have greeted them, should they have stumbled into my African village a few hundred years ago, might have rejoiced their hearts. But the astonishment with which they greet me today can only poison mine. You hear in his words the deep sadness and the rage in the sheer clarity of his writing, how history has trapped them and how they are living out the history now. And it is this same sadness and rage that I hear coursing through my visits now. Both black and white trapped in unjust systems that are leading to our demise. Is there an escape, people ask me? Can we edge our way to the end of the mat and tap out of this wrestling match? Is it possible to fight our way out, to pin our opponents and to win? Or what if we just play dead? Would it all just go away? The Buddhist tradition teaches that freedom comes from the practice of acceptance. If we can accept where we are, says Cairo Duolingo, and not judge the disruption in our life as wrong or bad, we can touch great freedom. If we can accept where we are, we can touch great freedom. This is, she says, because fighting what is doesn't actually work. As the saying goes, whatever we resist persists. Now, this is confusing. It is not to say that we allow unjust systems to persist. It is not to say that we are not responsible for change. Not at all. For Baldwin says people who shut their eyes to reality simply invite their own destruction. And anyone who insists on remaining in a state of innocence long after the innocence is dead turns himself into a monster. Have we not seen the monsters among us? No, the practice of acceptance that Cairo Duolingo teaches requires us to have the courage to accept where we are as a people, as a nation, as a planet. This is where we are. That is how we touch freedom and liberation, through this acceptance, and then with enough space to be able to see how history is living through us and then change. The gift James Baldwin offers us is a radical acceptance of the history that Black and white, and I would add Indigenous Americans, are trapped in. He offers it with unwavering clarity. It is hard to read as a white person, and yet we must. This is where we are, people, he says. Acceptance is like taking a breath after realizing that you've been holding your breath for too long. If you live from that place of holding your breath, you are moving into your own destruction. But if you can take a breath, it allows you the ability to see the larger picture and see what choice you have in this moment. And it has that potential to transform that feeling of being trapped into a feeling of being bound together. Bound together is the phrase that Frances Watkins Harper called out in her 1866 speech to white suffragettes in New York City. She said, "We are all bound up together in one great bundle of humanity." She knew this firsthand, a Black woman born into a free household in 1825 who maintained her membership in both the African Methodist Episcopal Church of her upbringing and the mostly white congregation at First Unitarian in Philadelphia. She knew that the freedom articulated in the Declaration could not be built upon the enslavement and or subordination of any class of people. And she knew that she needed her white siblings to not feel trapped there, but to feel bound together with her in its liberation. She said to the convention, "Society cannot trample on the weakest of its members without receiving the curse in its own soul." Hers was a call to accept where we are, a call to accept, and instead of feeling trapped there, to bind ourselves as one in solidarity, to understand that our liberation occurs together. So yes, beloved, we are wrestling right now with a curse, as Harper calls it, or with history, as Baldwin calls it. Life may not look the way we envisioned it. Our task right now is to accept where we are, to accept who we are in all of our beauty and frailty. For we are not alone in this. We are bound together. And when we can accept that, we will touch freedom. So may it be. Amen.
May the work I've done speak for me. May the work I've done speak for me. When I come to the end of this road and I lay down this heavy load, may the work I've done speak for me. Let the life I've lived speak for me. Let the life I've lived speak for me. When I come to the end of this road and I lay down this heavy load, let the life I've lived speak for me. Let the friends I've made speak for me. Let the friends I've made speak for me. When I come to the end of this road and I lay down this heavy load, let the friends I made speak for me. Let the love I've shared speak for me. Let the love I've shared speak for me. When I come to the end of this road and I lay down this heavy load, let the life I've lived speak for me. Let the friends I've made speak for me. Let the love I've shared speak for me.
So Beacon, take your love and your light out into the world this day. knowing that each of us carries our stories with us. Take your light and your love out into the world with listening ears, listening to those around you and their stories, and offering them a balm for healing and for hope. So may it be. Amen.